Welcome to a very special episode of Abdullah to Zinc. I'm your host, the future Hall of Famer, Scotty B. I'm going to bring my co-host, aka my guest today, Leaping Andrew. And if you guys have read the description of this video, it's going to be a lot of fun. I came up with the idea that we're going to do this, and we're going to bring Andrew on right now. And I was sitting there one day, just twiddling my thumbs, and thought, hey, that'd be a lot of kind of a cool topic to come up with that I brought up. Which I'll tell what it is right now. We'll talk a little. We'll get into it, but so it was very popular. I want to say starting in the early '80s, but for yourself, you didn't get into it the late '90s. I mean, Meltzer and them guys were doing it in the early '80s, and it wasn't what you guys think it was. It was tape trading. Um, early. I remember reading early observers. And there was stuff in the question category slash classifieds. Guys want to switch tapes. Meltzer asking for tapes, stuff like that. I'll get into how you. We'll get into your background, Andrew, and how you started doing it, but we have to get into your background into pro wrestling, which we've heard a million times on this show. But we might have a few new. I know we have one new listener. She's a little bit, she'll tell us how it is. But first off, Andrew, talk about just your background in general. Like, where were you born, all that good stuff, and then we'll talk about the pro wrestling.
Well, I was born a very young man, and it was all downhill from there. But seriously, folks, I was born in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada, and the first 5 years of my life, I was just really into toys, action figures. Not even so much the play sets, just the men, as I used to call it. I want to play men, and I'd have my He-Man and Brave Stars and Dungeons and Dragons, different action figures. And I remember asking my grandfather to pick me up either Manny Faces or Faker, one of the He-Mans I didn't have. And he came home with, well, I'll bring it. He came home with this guy. And I had seen these action figures in the stores, and I didn't really have any interest in them. They were just too big. They wouldn't be compatible with my other action figures. And then I opened it up, and it had that new toy smell. And I was like, yeah, I can get behind this. And my personality is such that I can't go half-assed in anything. I have to use my entire buttocks. And I was getting Iron Sheik and Andre the Giant, and it was when I got Andre the Giant, that was when a friend of the family saw me playing with him, and he said, "Oh, I see you've got Andre the Giant there." And before then, I didn't know that these were based on real people. I just thought it was like He-Man or Skeletor, and instead, to find out that these were actual human beings and the interest of an adult, because when you're a young kid, you crave attention from an adult, and not phony attention, not when they say, "Oh, that's nice," but actual genuine interest in my interests. That's why a lot of boys get into sports, so that they can talk to men and on equal footing, and they're not being talked down to. But I wasn't quite yet into sports. So I started getting the wrestling magazines and finding out the history of wrestling. Like, before you knew, my favorite wrestler was Bruno Sammartino, just because finding out he had been the champion for so long, that was very impressive to me. And then I started renting tapes from different movie rental stores back when that was a thing. And then in, I want to say, 1990, I finally learned how to record.
We'll get to that in a
So,
minute. I'm not trying to get you. Don't go too far because I got
okay,
that question coming later. But I
yes.
don't mean to cut
So
you off.
that was
I'm
that
just
was
kind
my
of like
wrestling. That was my wrestling background.
just trying to get like a kind of an idea when you got started getting into it and stuff like that. We'll definitely get into the taping and stuff here in a couple minutes. Now, the first question I have for you, Andrew,
Yep.
what was your first LJ? Well, you already told us was Hulk Hogan.
Yep.
What was your favorite LJN figure and your least favorite LJN figure?
I'd say my favorite was Randy Savage. My late aunt Sandra bought it for me in Montreal, and it just was such a great likeness of Randy Savage. You can do the elbow drop, and I just loved it. Right up there was the Heart Foundation, because I didn't even know that they had action figures, and my grandfather had bought me the steel cage, and I was like, yeah. Like I said before, I wasn't big into the accessories or the big play sets. I just liked the toys, and I think he could tell that I wasn't that enthused. And then he went out and brought home the Heart Foundation, and that made me happy. I mean, if you want to make me happy, give me money or toys. And
You know, I
my
just wanted
least
to add to
favorite,
that. Go ahead. Go ahead.
oh,
Go ahead.
my least favorite was Ravish and Rick Rude. There was no playability at all with that figure.
Garbage. DiBiase wasn't much better. He was
Yeah.
pretty rough. He was bad. I'll tell you quickly. I know this is all about you today,
Mhm.
but I'll tell you my Heart Foundation story, which is great. Christmas of I want to think 87
Probably
or
87.
80, 87. Coming downstairs, the way it worked, my mother would never wrap. Oh, sorry. If anyone has kids watching, just put it in a room. I tell this story.
Nobody has kids watching. Nobody's watching the 6 minutes in.
Well, we might be lucky to have one person watching, but because she's critiquing us, not watching. I remember coming downstairs, and my mother would never wrap the presents of Santa. They'd be open, which is a really cool thing. And coming downstairs and seeing the Heart Foundation right in the front of the tree, and I flipped out. I was so pumped. I was a big Heart Foundation fan as a kid.
Yeah.
That was a big year for LGN, so I think I got a whole bunch of them. And just seeing the Heart Foundation right in the front of the tree, my eyes just lit right up. I was so stoked because
Oh
I
yeah,
always in the
have
middle
you
part of
looked
the
at
tree.
the list of the sorry, like
That's okay.
series 1 had the original 5, and then they kind of added Nikolai, Piper, Junkyard, and Hillbilly. And then series 2 had Bundy, Beefcake, Valentine, Short-haired Andre, I want to say George Animal Steel. And then series 3 they just went nuts and they released so many figures, including the
Probably
tag team.
there's probably guys in the locker room going, "Where the fuck's my pay?" Because
Where's
guys were
my money?
getting big money. I heard Sheik say, what did Sheik say he got off at once?
A lot.
Like, and it wasn't like, Sheik tend to lie, but I think it was telling the truth because I heard stories of guys getting big money off them merchandises. Like big. They were very lucrative. Well, they were very big. They were a very big deal. We all had them. It was a big deal. Okay, Lisa. So the next question I have for you, Andrew, because we're gonna get into the taping stuff here soon,
Mhm.
but we want to kind of like just get your background a bit. Your first live wrestling show, memory of it. The memory. How can I explain it in a way? If you don't remember your first wrestling show, kind of break down the one you do remember.
Oh, I remember it. I even know the date. It was June 3rd, 1986. It was at the Lord Beaverbrook Rink. It was a Grand Prix show, and the advertised main event was Cuban Assassin and Leo Burke against the Spoiler and Nikita Karmlikov. I think that was his name. The Russian, the token Russian. If you were a wrestling promotion in the 80s, you had somebody that had face paint and you had a Russian. And my uncle Joe and Aunt Shirley took me. This would have been the day before my birthday. And I remember seeing the World Grand Prix wrestling show on ATV, and they would always talk about the different shows or different cities they were going to: Berwick, Antigonish, Fredericton, Moncton, Halifax, all these different cities. And they never said St. John. The first time they said St. John, I was so pumped, and they got me tickets for my birthday, and we went. And I remember the Cuban Assassin match because they were brawling into the stands, and I just had a great time. I think I had been to the LBR before then for the circus, and this was my first wrestling show. And then I would eventually go to a bunch more, but that was my first one.
What was your favorite wrestling show that you've been to live? And while you're answering that question, kind of stretch. I gotta grab some water, so kind of break down a little bit, so I can give myself a minute to do that. So go ahead with your favorite wrestling show ever.
My favorite wrestling show was my
That you
first
seen
ever.
live. That you seen live,
Yeah, that
not
I
just
saw
favorite
live,
show. Yeah,
of
okay,
course.
okay, go
And
ahead.
I was in the building, and it was in Montreal, August. I want to say 24, 1990, and My mother and I, we had went to Montreal 4 years before, and then we went again in 1990. And I knew that they were going to be there because on Maple Leaf Wrestling or different shows like All American, they would treat Canada like it was a small little town. So if you lived in St. John, New Brunswick, you were hearing about the show that was happening in Regina, Saskatchewan, even though a show in Boston is a lot closer. But anyway, I had seen that they were going to be in Montreal, and same deal. My cousin Sandra and her daughter Tammy and son David and me and my mom, we had a box at the Montreal Forum, and we arrived a little bit late. It was about halfway through the opener, which was Jumpin' Jim Brunzell against Playboy Buddy Rose. And from there, we're off to the races. Then we've got Hercules against Tito Santana, Ronnie Garvin against Barbarian, Demolition Axe and Crush against the Hart Foundation, Jake the Snake Roberts against Bad News Brown, Brooklyn Brawler against Jose Luis Rivera. And it's funny because I had a bit of a Mandela effect moment. My whole life, I thought it was Reno Riggins. And then I went on to the interwebs and saw that it was actually Jose Luis Rivera. Anyway, and then the main event was Randy Savage and Sensational Sherry against Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire with Brother Love as a special referee. And
Pretty
this whole
stacked.
show was about 4 hours long. 4 hours, 4.5 hours.
Yeah, they were big in Montreal. They made a big deal. It was like I wouldn't know if it's called the New York of Canada because Toronto more or less, but it's close with Montreal.
Well, yeah, because it was like an MSG show because during intermission they announced the next month card, which was headlined by all three members of Demolition against Legion of Doom and Ultimate Warrior. And I remember thinking, damn it, I wish I would have been here a month later because I was really excited for that program.
You're a big and you were also at the famous show that World Wrestling Federation ambushed
Oh,
in
yeah.
St. John,
Well,
Canada.
kind of. I was in line.
Yes, that was the one where they had the gas leak, and Gary Capetta blamed Vince. Thought Vince is really going to ambush the St. John show. It's so important.
Yeah, it was gonna be headlined by Ric Flair and the Midnight Express against Lex Luger and the Road Warriors, which would have been awesome to see. Instead, there was an ammonia leak and missed out.
I remember KC, as we will refer to him as right now, was
We
in
had an
line with
Ultimate
his
Warrior
Ultimate
jacket.
Warrior jacket. He has Ultimate Warrior jacket. He had been at WrestleMania 6. He had been 6 rows back at WrestleMania. And if you watch the Rockers come to the ring, Chubby KC's got his hand out, shaking their hand. It's like, oh man, that's your whole claim to glory, or excuse me, your fame to glory. All right, so let's hop in now. We're gonna start talking about when you were younger. This is around the same time you started making your own compilations. Am I correct?
Yeah, it started with me at different video stores seeing if I could buy tapes. I remember having the Coliseum home videos of Royal Rumble 89, SummerSlam 89, Survivor Series 88, Mania 1, 3, 6, and different shows like that. And then in 1990, I figured out how to record on the VCR because prior to then, I didn't understand quite how to do it. And there was a section in my mom's VCR. It was CATV, and I didn't know what that meant. And that was cable TV. That basically meant you could record above channel 13 because before then I could only record if it was 2 to 13. And that opened up the TSN window to me. And I think the very first thing I ever recorded was a Grand Prix show. It was on my WrestleMania tape, which also had the Hulkster, not Hulkamania, but the Hulkster, the 60-minute version. And then at the end of that, there was Rock and Roll Rebel Express, Dino Ventura, and Kid Dynamite, because Emile Dupree loved his copyright infringements, against Nature Boy Sweet Tan and Mad Dog Butcher Vachon. And I just remember that vividly. But then I didn't do any recording for years afterwards. So this would have been recorded like 87, 88, around there. And then in 1990, I started recording any feature match, any match between two name wrestlers, or if they were a job guy, if I knew that they could put on a good match, like a Reno Riggins, Jim Brunzell, Jimmy Powers, Brooklyn Brawler, Iron Mike Sharp, those types of guys, depending on who they were against. If they were against like a Tito Santana, that would be worth recording. If they were against Hacksaw Jim Duggan or Ultimate Warrior, I knew that was going to be just a pure squash, not worth hitting record. And I would use the SLP or EP feature because I was all about quantity over quality. I wanted to cram as much wrestling content on these tapes as possible.
Wouldn't
And
EP be better than SLP? SLP was only 2 hours. EP was 8 hours, was it not?
same thing. It was depending on the VCR. It was either SLP or EP. It went SP, LP, SLP, or EP,
Okay.
depending on the VCR.
Okay.
LP, in hindsight, is the optimal because a lot of the wrestling shows are beyond 2 hours. With SP, it maxes out at 2 hours. LP, you'd have slightly worse quality, but not that bad. And you'd be able to get a full pay-per-view and some other stuff on it. Whereas EP or SLP, it was grainy as shit, but you get a lot in it. And I remember whether it be an RCA or Sony, Maxell, Memorex, the different blank tapes. And I remember making my very first compilation tape and then cutting from the WF magazine because it was glossy and color photos, picture of Haku, and then gluing the back of it onto the tape. And that used to be what I would do. I would find a picture of somebody who was on one of the matches on that tape and glue it onto the case, and then on the back with cardboard, which I would then also glue on the back, I would do a match listing of all the matches on the tape.
That's some dedication right there. Okay, let's jump into the next question here. So you do that as a kid. When did you first hear tape trading?
Well, the first time I went on the internet would have been 1995 when I went to high school and we had computers in the library, and I was all about the wrestling. And within a few years, I'm seeing, because you branch out. You may initially be in it for the inside scoops or the results from the night before, but eventually you're going to go down a bunch of different rabbit holes. And I would hear about these tape traders, and I had sizable enough collection based just on taping stuff off TV, renting and taping. That's something I didn't touch on, but eventually we would hook up two VCRs, my grandparents' VCR, my mom's VCR, and I would rent wrestling tapes. I would really like, my main focal point was always on non WWF stuff. If there was like at the Blockbuster, they had Wrestle War 90. And then I would go to a corner store and maybe they had Starcade 89. And I would combine these two shows onto a tape. Sometimes I could fit three because, as you know, Turner Home Entertainment tend to really butcher a lot of their shows, and they would squeeze it into a 2 hour tape, a 3 hour event, three and a half hour
So
event, and 2 hour
can I cut
tape.
you out there for a second? You didn't pay attention to the FBI warning in the first video because
Well, FBI doesn't have any jurisdiction over me, pal. It would have to be
true.
the RCMP, and they always
Yeah,
get their man.
that's true. But anyway, keep going.
Um, so yeah, I had a sizable enough collection where I'd say I had about maybe 50, 60 tapes at that point, just on my own, just from years of recording wrestling and sometimes recording over it too, which I really regret. Um, and then I would go to these different sites and see what they had. And I thought, okay, I can do this. And in high school, my friend Steve and I, we made these very derogatory websites that got me in a lot of trouble. And they were on this site called X Pages, which was ugly as hell and very, very basic, but very user friendly. You didn't have to know code or HTML or C, CC plus or anything like that to figure out how to do this. It was very intuitive. And I, on top of my edgy teen website, I created Pimp Daddy's Pro Wrestling Tape Trading. And I just basically had a list of all the things I had, everything I could remember. Because you got to remember, I didn't have the internet at home. So I had to use my big old pre-drug addled brain to just remember everything that I had and list it all out and included my email address and put it out there, and would also plug it on different sites. And I remember being in the Death Valley Driver video review message board chat room. This would have been, I want to say 99. And I had,
I think TK probably would have been in there at that time with you. Surprised Tony never came to for videos. Because
it
I mean,
wouldn't surprise me. I mean, we ran in a very similar circle,
yeah.
like an online circle.
Mm.
And I was fairly known on there for better or for worse. So it's entirely possible that he knows who I am.
Probably for worse.
Yeah.
But anyway, keep going.
And I remember plugging, just like putting the link in the chat room, and the Pimp Daddy. And so that's how they just would call me Pimp Daddy, which was a name that I didn't give myself. It was my nickname in high school. And I found that it was kind of, full disclosure, I used to go by Andrew D, my last name, for years. And eventually it was driving me up the wall, because I'm a firm believer in easily defined, easily dismissed. If somebody can sum you up really quickly, then you're too easily summarized. And I didn't like that. I was just known as a guy that had his middle initial, so I just dropped it entirely. And with Pimp Daddy's Pro Wrestling Tape Trading, the Pimp Daddy part was commanding too much attention, and they weren't actually going on there and taking a look at what I had. So I changed it to Sharp Wrestling Tapes, because another friend of mine, Anthony, he and I were talking about different words that somebody's grandmother would use that was pretty funny. And he would say something like, "Well, you're looking smart today." And I was like, "Yeah, that's something that youthful young people don't say. That's kind of lost to that generation. It's the older ones." And I said, and sharp. And I remember just getting a big laugh, like, looking pretty sharp, lads. And I would overuse sharp. It was just my word for a few years there. So I just called it Sharp Wrestling Tapes, and moved everything that I had from Pimp Daddy's over. And I did a couple of tape trades with Pimp Daddy. The way it went is, if you went to somebody first, you sent first. And what is
I don't know if
this?
can you see
Oh, yeah.
that?
Yeah, here it
Can you
is.
see the site? Okay. So here's the site here. Let's go take a look at it. We have LaSalle Comps over here.
Yeah.
We have a bunch of ads up top, which is a pain in the ass. But I remember going through, look at these ads. I remember watching a lot of these, like in order ones. There's a lot of good shit on there.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
because
especially,
eventually
go
that's
ahead.
what I started doing. That was what, because I like to just do stuff on top of other stuff. So just tape trading was great, but I wanted to like make compilation tapes from the best stuff from each tape. And but not too much from one another tape, or else it's just pretty much copy and paste. Like, for
So
example,
go,
say Super Brawl 3, I wouldn't put Sting and Vader on the same one that had Too Cold and Benoit. I would make sure that one was on one comp, and another was on another.
Still looks like shooters. You have Marty Jannetty, which is fucking Marty's crazy. Or the New Jack one's nuts. Um, you didn't have the Terry Gordy one on here at this time, but you eventually had it. And that was a
Are
horrible
you
one. That
sure
was
it's not there?
embarrassing. Yeah, no, it is. Sorry, my bad. It's right here.
Yep.
There it is. I remember my favorite one out of all these. I'd seen a lot of them. Was where's it hiding at? Jack Victory, but I can't find it at the top of my head. Jack Victory was my favorite one of all of them.
Do you remember who the first one I got was?
Terry Funk.
No,
Al Snow?
no. I'll just tell you.
Michaels?
Yeah, Michaels.
Yeah. Okay. I remember watching. I remember the Funk one being like really long, like a long, long, long Funk
It
one was
was
really long.
long, and Terry tends to, like, he's Southern, right? So he'll really draw out his syllables, so it'll just go even longer.
I remember Brett. I remember Brett's. I remember Sean's.
Yep.
Um,
John had chewing
that
tobacco. I remember. Same with
that
Flair.
was that was like a big deal. Like I mean, no one's really watching it. The kids were watching this. I mean, early 2000s, them shooties were a really big deal to
Well,
get them.
for me, like when I would go to somebody's site, I would always look for older stuff. Like that was my main interest back then. I've always been more interested in the classic stuff. Um, speaking of All Japan Classics, if somebody had an All Japan Classics front of the line, I'm grabbing all of those from someone. But a lot of times, if somebody came to me first, everything they had I already had, so I'd have to like try to find a better quality version of something I already had with the hopes that it's better quality. But I had seen the term like shoot interview, like let's say Bill Watts shoot interview, but I didn't know what it meant. And there was somebody that came to me and they didn't really have a whole lot of stuff. And one of the few things they had that I didn't have that I was interested in, because sometimes there would be stuff that I didn't have, but I still wouldn't want, like backyard wrestling stuff. I didn't have any interest in that. But I saw Shawn Michaels shoot interview, so I thought, yeah, I'll see what this is. And I watched it. I was like, I really like the concept. And so something I had beforehand kind of treated like backyard wrestling, where if I saw it on somebody's page, I didn't care. I was more interested in the either pay-per-view events I didn't have or TV or compilations, whatever it may be. The wrestling, but then the shoot interviews became something I wouldn't want to only have shoot interviews, but I would definitely go there and I'll get a shoot interview instead of getting something I already have with the hopes of having a better quality version of it.
I stole the concept for my harness racing thing. My harness racing website. I do interviews, and it's all the same kind of deal. It's but I don't say I'm joined by an all-time legend today. That is such a name, and I start laughing at everything they say, like Rob Feinstein does. I'm more, But anyway, so the next question I have, Amy. So you're going through, you're doing your tape, you're running high. It's early 2000s. One question is biggest tape trade ever.
There was one that was a huge box that I had received, and it contained Smoky Mountain Television, Memphis TV, and NWA TV. And then there was another one that I
88
got.
TV. I remember that. We split, not to cut you off, but I remember when you got that, I think we split that because I took some of them with me
It was so
and you
much.
would, yeah, I remember watching NWA 88 stuff. That was in the summer of 2000. You got that. I had
Yeah.
my place on King Street. And I remember watching and just, not to cut you off, but being blown away by Flair. Like, I was just all about, like, all Flair's interviews, like, oh my God, this guy's that was fucking mine. He's so great. And the Midnight Express, being a big fan of the Midnight Express. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah. There was also a huge tape trade that I got where I got pretty much every Clash of the Champions that I had never seen, along with a lot of WCW/NWA pay-per-views. And I remember just coming in a big box. Like rarely would I be home to get the package? So I would always have to go to the post office. Like there'd be the occasional time where uh, I was home because I remember there was a period of time when I was working 4 to 12 a lot. So I was home during the day sometimes. Like sometimes I would be out and about because I'm off during the day, but sometimes I was home and I would be there when the wrestling tape came, and that would always be the best. That means I didn't have to get dressed. I didn't have to go to the to. Sometimes it was the Shoppers, or sorry, the Lawtons in Brunswick Square. Other times it was the post office on. Oh, I can't remember the street names now.
Crown Street, right down.
Yep, yep,
Yeah,
that
Crown.
one.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Depending on where I lived at the time. My very first
So,
tape trade, I was still living at home with my parents and family.
did you ever trade with, let's say, any famous people, any pro grapplers,
Mhm.
like, do you remember?
Yeah, yeah, I traded with Vicious Vern Siebert, who wrestled here in the Maritimes as Nature Boy Sweetan, and I actually saw him ref a few shows when I first moved out here because he's based on the West Coast. Um, I I traded with him. Um, Other people I wouldn't say are famous at all. No, that not that I remember. Probably like within the wrestling community, I traded with some people there, like one of the admins for Death Valley Driver Video Review. He wanted my Real World Tag League 77 to 79, and I don't remember what else. But you will know this as somebody who did some taping with me or was around when I was taping myself, because I had a dual deck VCR that I
Oh, yes. Keep
spent a
going. Go
thousand
ahead.
dollars on a dual deck VCR to just do something that I had been wanting. Because when you hook up two VCRs, if people are even old enough to remember VCRs, it's where you played VHS tapes, and you would
Well, they know now. They talked about it on Raw, so they don't know. They know all of the VHS tapes now. Go ahead.
don't date this episode. So they would occasionally fuck up. So you'd have one of the VCRs that maybe doesn't rewind tapes anymore, or it's really bad quality. And so then you're just cycling out. So you'd have one VCR that works, another one that doesn't. Finally, you get another one that works, and the one that was working before that starts to fail on you. So I just wanted that to be over with because it was a bunch of baloney. Because you get these tape trades set up, and then you can't do anything about it. So I bought a double deck VCR, and my main point was, out of all the stuff that I had, the most requested, the most wanted stuff, and I'm sure you'll know this because see,
I'm well
folks
aware.
folks
I'm well
at
aware.
home
I had to record one show. I swear to God, I never want to see it. There
I'm
was
watching
two
it
ones
right
that
now.
they always wanted: King Louis '95, again, King Louis '95, or Memphis TV.
That's Memphis right there, brother.
Yeah, it was. And I always just stuck with King Louis '95, which was just like, my God, it was so bad. And I don't know if people wanted to see it because it was so bad. Like maybe that was the reason behind it. They're thinking, well, it's this bad, I want to see it. But yeah, it was some bad. It was not good. Let's put it that way. Gay. This is kind of like a question. Like you haven't scammed before. Obviously, everyone's been scammed doing tape trading.
Yeah, that happens.
Let's say the most disappointing scam. If you remember.
I remember one, and I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if I get scammed because when you deal with the post office, it's a gamble. Sometimes things will work out. For this particular one that I still remember to this day, I lived on Duke Street in St. John, New Brunswick for 2 months. And within those 2 months, I did get quite a bit of tape trading sent to that address, including a series of MSG and Spectrum and Boston Garden shows, and I was really excited for those. And it also had some Saturday Night's main events. It was just a great trade. But the one I remember was Best of Tiger Mask. I had gotten the Best of Dynamite Kid, and I loved that tape. That tape was awesome, and a lot of it was against Tiger Mask. But I wanted to see Tiger Mask against people that weren't Dynamite Kid. And now there was a lot of Dynamite Kids. There was a lot of Dynamite Kid stuff on that Dynamite Kid tape that didn't have Tiger Mask, but I wanted to see Tiger Mask against other opponents. And I moved, so I don't know if what the deal was, but I did have some connections at that apartment. So I would ask if I had gotten any mail, and it never arrived. And that particular one is one that I remember because I just wanted that tape, and it was where I was no longer at that apartment. So I vividly remember expecting it there, and even getting my mail forwarded, it never arrived.
Yeah, well, I remember doing one for you with a guy. I forget what it was. It took forever to get it done, and then when he finally sent it, the quality was just unbearable. Like it was Battle Bowl '93 and a
That one
couple other
wasn't that
things.
bad quality. I remember that tape trade. There was a lot of bad quality. There was Bash at the Beach '97, unwatchable, unwatchable.
Excuse me. Yeah, it was a bad one. I just remember that being forever to get done. Let's see here. Shipping. Like that was another thing. Like, man, it cost me a small fortune to do some shipping, I would assume.
Yeah. So one or two to me wasn't really worth it. Like I wanted to do big trades. Like if I'm going to spend money at the post office, I want to get a lot of stuff back. Because sending, say, 3 tapes would cost upwards of $25 for shipping, whereas sending a box that had, say, 20 tapes in it may cost $50. So you look at it like, well, it's just $30 more, and I'm getting a lot more back as opposed to this bullshit for 3 tapes that is costing way too much. So I would much rather do these big ones. And you couldn't go cheap on the box, because if you did it with an envelope, you're gonna get a damaged tape. You gotta use a box, folks. If you're in the tape trading world in 2024, and don't laugh because I still get emails because my website's still out there, and people looking for stuff to this day.
Let me ask you a question, and I think we've done this before. You go on to it. What's like a site that you remember going on to? It's like, okay, this guy's full of shit.
I don't
Too good to
remember
be
that.
true. I think I remember a
No.
few where it's like, what? There's no way. There's no way that's true. It's just
Well,
someone
there
bullshitting.
there are certain legends in the tape trading world, like Scott Mailman, um, Jeff Lynch. No, not Jeff. Yeah, Jeff Lynch. That just had everything. Like they would be the ones that like a Meltzer would go to for like if he wanted All Japan TV September '86 to October '86. Okay, here it is. Like just a vast
I would
litany of
say
stuff.
WWF's with Richard Land now. Like Richard Land gets some incredible WWF stuff. Like I mean, the fact that he got the satellite feed from Main Event 2, he's got an audio of Savage as a jobber as it's
The
called
Spider.
Randy Poffo or the Spider, but And it's an interesting thing is this, he wrestles. I forget who he wrestles again. It might be what's his name there. Oh my god, Johnny Rods.
Mm.
And at the end of the match, there's a bunch of bands just trying to get his services, Johnny Rods' services, thinking, "Huh, that's kind of funny." 10 years later, they're saying they were Savage. But anyway, that's original land. Like, yeah, he's some great stuff. So let me follow up our next question. So doing tape trading, obviously you've seen a lot of stuff. Um, Getting into it, what made you like? What was your favorite territory or thing that you've seen? And the second part of the question is the most disappointing, like the most overrated one. You thought, "Oh my god, I can't wait to see it," and then you get like, "Oh, this is kind of trash."
That's a good question. First, um, I loved all Japan '80s stuff. When I saw the ring that was half blue, half red, I knew that for the next 45 minutes, I was gonna be watching nothing but greatness. Like just awesome stuff, whether it be Brody and Hanson against the Funks or Jumbo against Flair or Bockwinkel against Jumbo or Martel against Flair, Von Erich against Jumbo, Tenru against Steamboat, like just stuff that I remember being a kid. And the stuff that was always the most interesting to me in arena reports was Puerto Rico and Japan, because it seemed like that was where they would have the weirdest matches to me. It didn't face and heel alignment didn't seem like it mattered at all. And I loved it because it made it seem more like a sport. It made it seem more realistic. Like, why is it that these guys are always against each other but never with each other? Or why these guys ever wrestle each other just because they're both baby faces? It doesn't make any sense if you give it any thought outside the wrestling logic. And the matches were great. So it wasn't just the idea of these dream matches that wind up all being like, what's a bad dream match? Orndorff Morocco Mania 2. It winds up being like, oh, so that's what happens when Terry Funk wrestles Stan Hansen. Awesomeness. And I would say the most overrated, or the one that I went in with high expectations for and didn't deliver. I, I kind of almost want to say ECW, but I have a soft spot because there was a couple of tapes that I had that I showed people and they became huge fans of it, because there may be some, and a lot, sorry, a lot of garbage, like a lot of walking brawls, a lot of the main event being something like the Gangsters against Public Enemy or the Bruise Brothers against Tommy Dreamer and somebody, and or Dudley's and whomever eliminators. Just these tag matches that I found to be a chore. But there was a lot of interesting stuff on the undercard. I would say honestly, the thing that kind of disappointed me the most as far as expectation, probably Smoky Mountain. It's something that there's a couple matches here and there, but if you were to go looking through the LaSalle comps, I don't know if I had any Smoky Mountain matches on there.
Because like, for me, I'll tell you mine because I was there a whole lot of the time. All Japan '90s, that's my stuff. All Japan '90s really like was like, oh fuck, this is
Oh, I
great.
love that 90s too.
Well, that got me into the point where I'm like going out and getting like Japanese video games because of that. Like I'm obsessed with it. Most overrated, I think for me was Memphis. I found Memphis very overrated. I didn't like it. I wasn't a fan. But yeah, so that's basically everything. But the question we have for you, Andrew, is now we went through your whole tape, and then you go through a whole run. And I mean, I'm there, so I'm there watching this. Like I'm here at your apartment with your trunks full of tapes, which is, and then at one point you moved to Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and who do you hand the trunk off to?
That guy right there.
And I had it. For a long time, I had been in an apartment with a friend of mine. We had all the tapes in the living room, and everyone was like, "Oh, is that porn?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's porn." You fucking close-minded piece of shit. Like, go fuck yourself
Oh, I would
because
get that all the time too because I had
it's so
that
idiotic.
plus more. Because
It's so
I
idiotic.
actually started getting into DVDs
Mm,
while I still had a lot of tapes,
yeah.
and it 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 pretty much put the end for me in tape trading. Like I would still, if somebody wanted stuff, if somebody came to me, I would sell it. But I wasn't like getting anything back. I didn't want any more tapes because now I was turning my attention toward digital versatile discs and having that physical media, good quality. And then all of a sudden I became a quality snob. Something where when I was tape trading, I would watch stuff that looked like it was ninth, 10th generation just because
Well,
I had never seen it. And
you
so,
know,
like, we grew up watching pay-per-views through static, where it was just
yeah,
pretty much audio.
and you're hoping to see, I see something type of thing. I'll tell you, we have a lot of memories of your tape trading. And I remember, I remember myself. I remember babysitting a friend's kid one time. She wanted to go for the night. And going to your place. I need to get some tapes. I grabbed like seven or eight tapes. And I got a babysitter for the whole night. And I go to her place and I remember watching the class. But the best thing ever, for me at least, you got a tape trade. You called me up. I was living in the north and you live uptown. And so you need to get over here right away. I'm like, what's that? It's like worst match ever.
Oh
You
yes.
need to come over right away. So I go over and it was that world class match. So I couldn't run the ropes for the fuck. Who was one of the guys? One of the guys actually went on to do
I know
something
I
a
know
little bit,
both
didn't
the
it?
guys.
Okay, who was it again?
Actually, I don't know both the guys. I'm gonna have to
I thought you
go.
did.
Um, I know one's Tom Boogaloo Shaft,
Hmm.
and I'm just gonna look through my search history here on YouTube.
Is there a video of it?
I think it's Larry Higgins. Yeah, it's
Hold
Larry
on.
Higgins versus Tom Shaft.
There is
It's
video of that.
yeah, it's on YouTube. It's from the
Well,
Vintage
what you should
Wrestling
do,
Channel.
send me a link to that and I'll put it in the description because you gotta watch that match. It's an absolute shit show. It is one of the funniest things. I mean, I've seen bad matches, but it's like, wow, I just can't believe that's on TV, which is hilarious. So by the end of it, what do you have? 600,000 tapes?
It's tough to say because I would, if you looked on the website, what's there, it doesn't let you know how much stuff is on one tape. So I can see a physical listing of all of the
Events.
content that I had,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
don't know how many physical tapes that took
You,
up. I
you,
know that there was one trunk full, at least one trunk, couple of different cases that had rows where you can put in your VHS tape,
I
and
know
I
what you
had
mean. Yeah.
several of those.
I remember, see, when I started getting back into harness racing and doing their history, I remember people coming over with just boxes of tapes. And it's like, it's an exciting, like for that, it's exciting, it's history. I know, like for you, but there's something, I mean, now, not to say, oh, you kids have it so good now, but you can go into something fun about tape trading, waiting for it. You get it. It's a big event when you get it.
You appreciate it. You watch it.
Yeah.
When when
Yeah.
when you're watching stuff on YouTube or Daily Motion or Vimeo or even cable, you're half watching because you've got your phone right here, and the wrestling's it's on. You're listening to it, and every once in a while you look up. But hey, if you miss something that you're like, oh, what was that? You just rewind it.
Yeah.
Just use your remote. You don't have to actually like blindly rewind it and hope that you get it just in the right spot, like you did with
It's,
VHS.
it was a fun time. Definitely a fun time. So, Aaron the Tape Trader, thank you for coming on. Abdullah to Zinc. And then you want to add to our great audience before you leave?
Well, I thought that this was going to be on um, your harness racing channel. That's why I thought you were interviewing me. I thought it was there. It wasn't until you said, "Welcome to Abdullah the Zinc."
Oh, we can change it. I don't know. We'll put it on one of them. I'll just put. I find like they don't really care on that harness racing site, so I'm gonna put it on this one. I'm pretty sure, but we'll see what
Well, I mean, it'll
happens.
just go in the stack of stuff
Oh
that
no! This one's going out like soon. This is probably going tonight.
I thought that we were
So
banned for a month.
we'll see what we can do. We'll have to play around with it. If I can't get it, I'll use the harness racing site if I can't do ours.
Okay.
So. All right, Andrew the Tape Trader, Leaping Andrew. We thank you for coming on to the podcast on this great evening. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button. And we'll see you again on another episode of Abdullah to Zinc. Good night. And recording.